Techlandia is recorded at the Central Office on the East Side in Portland. Central Office is a one stop for all your office or meeting needs. Check them out at centraloffice.com.
Welcome to the latest episode of Techlandia, Tao's regular podcast series. I'm Skip Newberry, President and CEO of Tao. And with us, we're happy to have here as our guest, Andy Harris with Northwest Corporate Law. Andy, welcome.
Thanks, Skip. Thanks for having me.
Well, Andy, I'd love to start off by asking you, could you walk us through your kind of professional trajectory? How'd you end up at Northwest Corporate Law? Any sort of common themes or passion that kind of animates you in terms of your profession?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a lawyer my whole career and working in law for 25 years, which I honestly didn't anticipate from the get-go. But I'll kind of walk you through it step by step, but rather quickly, so I don't bore anybody on the listening end here. But I started as a paralegal in New York at one of those massive firms and worked there for a couple of years. Went to law school out in Chicago, stayed in Chicago for a couple of years and clerked for a judge, and then decided to come west, moved to Portland in 2007. Once I got my feet underneath me, I ended up getting a job as a securities litigator. Did that for about half a dozen years, and then finally had enough money, paid down enough of my student loans, and enough courage to go out on my own and do what I had wanted to do for quite a while, which was to be on sort of the more positive side of the law, if you will, and help people build companies, grow them, just kind of be more of an advisor for entrepreneurs and people who are excited about building their dream projects. And so I went out on my own and started this firm, Northwest Corporate Law, in 2013. And it was just me in a 2-bedroom apartment, kind of making it up as I go. And I had some early success or enough success to, start hiring, get a little office, and it just kind of grown steadily over the years. I mean, we're only a team of 4, but I like to think we're a strong team of 4. And so I've been doing that for the last 12 years. And we focus really exclusively on just corporate work and business work for entrepreneurs and small business owners.
That's great. And I also went to law school and practiced for a little bit. And the advice I got when I was thinking about the law school path from current attorneys was, well, be a paralegal for a year or two. And if you still enjoy the practice of law or the idea of it after that, then law school is probably worth it. Did you get similar advice, or did you decide, I'm going to be a paralegal first?
Yeah, I did get similar advice. And when I was starting to apply to law school, I was going around the firm I worked at, Clifford Chance at the time, again, one of those massive firms, and knocking on the doors of the associates there asking for letters of referral for school. And, more than one of them, I just remember them sitting back and just kind of smirking at me and thinking like, did you not learn anything here? Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. But,
well, another thing that I think, based on your history, that would be really helpful in your current role, especially, working with folks that are trying to figure out how to avoid ending up in litigation, is to have had experience litigating, securities law, corporate disputes, et cetera. You see what goes wrong, and you can avoid that when you're doing the corporate law work.
yeah. I mean, you're kind of making a pitch for me. It's that's part of the conversation I have, with a lot of clients, whether they're new clients or existing ones. Is sort of, I saw the bad side. I saw when deals blew up over and over again, and I saw that when I was clerking for the judge in Chicago. She sat in the Chancery Division, which, if it means anything to your audience or not, it's basically resolving disputes by forcing people to do or not do something. But a lot of disputes before her were shareholder disputes, and she had no interest in that work. And so she basically just gave me those projects and just thought I was kind of crazy to be interested in them. But so I worked on it there, and then did the securities litigation work as well, which, was very practical, pointed work in the sense that I just literally saw these financial transactions blowing up again and again and again. And then brought all that knowledge to the flip side of the practice, which is what I'm doing now, which is obviously trying to help people build the companies and avoid those sorts of outcomes.
I was wondering if you could take a little bit of time just to talk a little bit about your clients. What size stage of company do you all work with, and are there certain verticals that you're specializing in?
Yeah, sure. So we're kind of a reflection of the Portland area market, which, when people come from larger markets, they say sort of like, "What's your niche?" And a lot of times I tell people like, "We don't have a hyper niche. I don't think the market's big enough to support that for a boutique firm." But we try to focus on we try to focus on tech. We always have over the years. Just to be honest, I think there's only so much of that we can support from an entrepreneurial level to a degree. Um, and so, beyond that, we also do a lot of work with kind of what I just call boring companies, no offense, but just the ones that don't make the headlines, mom and pop companies, generational companies, manufacturing companies, companies that build the stuff that it's just not really sexy necessarily, but they need a good go-to corporate counsel to help them grow the company or, help them transition from, one generation down to the next, which we're seeing a lot of that type of work now too, because the baby boomers are obviously transitioning out, and they need to do something with these companies. They need to pass them down sometimes to their kids or family members or sell. But yeah, that's kind of some of the work we're seeing at the moment.
And are there companies that are like too early stage for you to engage with? What advice do you give to entrepreneurs that are like, well, I might be like, when should I talk to an attorney in this process?
Mm. Yeah, I think if people aren't sure, they typically don't reach out to us because I think the sense I get over the years is that people only call the attorney when they're sure they're going to go forward, unless they're calling on a courtesy referral basis. For example, if someone gets my name from a friend or from a good client and knows that I'm happy to talk to them on a courtesy basis. Otherwise, when they reach out to us, it's typically that they're ready to hit go on their project because they know, yeah, if they're ready to go with the attorneys, they're gonna start spending money, and it becomes a real exercise as opposed to just theoretical. But
Mhm.
I've had some courtesy conversations over the years with folks who are exploring an idea, just want to know what it's like to run a company, and I'm happy to have those conversations. And I've probably I've talked more people out of doing it than doing it. I think over the years, not with any intention that they shouldn't do it, but I think I just present all the real hurdles in growing a company. And a lot of times I tell people, you know, have you had, if you've had kids, it's very similar to building a company, right? It's just like an enormous amount of unknowns coming from all directions at once. Right? So
Mhm.
you just have to be realistic with yourself about that's what you're going to take on.
I'm wondering too. A lot of folks often think of lawyers as sort of a necessary evil, unfortunately. And I think back to a moment in time where I was working on a deal, and this guy disclosed to me that he was like, "Oh, lawyers." He's like, "Speed bumps on the road to progress," is what we like to refer to them as, and I think that good attorneys are often, especially on the commercial side, seen as more of a partner, a business partner that can help you think through some of the issues, identify risks, and get you from point A to point B, as opposed to like, here's all the reasons why this won't work, full stop, right? And so I'm wondering, like, are you seeing opportunities where you're able to kind of coach some of these entrepreneurs and also educate and inform them a little bit more about, no, really, this is what an effective engagement looks like with a good lawyer?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, to that point, is it seems like as the years have gone by, our advice, obviously we're lawyers, so we give the legal advice, but it's really blends closely with business consulting advice because we just see the patterns that entrepreneurs fall into, whether good or bad, that successful business owners fall into, that failing business owners fall into. And so, we can step back over the years and look at it and just see it pretty quickly when someone comes in with a specific problem or wants to talk about potential problem. A lot of the advice we end up giving them is on the business side as well. We tell them, okay, it's not legal advice, but just listen. Like we've seen this pattern before. You're starting to go down this road. It's probably a bad idea, or you're doing the right thing. It kind of falls within standard market terms. So, so yeah, there's a lot of coaching involved, right? I get as the relationships, and it goes for, obviously, for all the attorneys here, as our relationships develop over the years, and I've had a lot of them since the beginning personally, for the last 10, 12 years. People call with all sorts of questions because they just look at the at the corporate attorney as almost like an outside board of directors or just a general advisor to the company. And what happens for us when the relationships are really successful is they become remarkably productive because we just know the companies inside and out. We just know how the executives think. We know what their goals are intuitively, and we just welcome them to bring all sorts of problems to us. Obviously, if something's well outside of our capacity or we just can't do it, we'll tell them. But yeah, we really become an advisor in a lot of different ways.
What are some of the common missteps that you see early stage entrepreneurs making as they get going?
Yeah, boy, that's a big question, but I'll see if I can give you some great answers here if I can. But I think and so starting a company is ridiculously easy these days, right? Like LegalZoom figured it out for especially one founder companies, and there's all the knockoffs out there, and there's sort of the fast growth company templates as well, like Carta, if anyone's heard of them. I guess what I'm trying to say is to start a company, it's basically become a product these days, and but it's not a one size fits all product, right? So I think a lot of people think that starting a company means pressing a button and and just kind of being done, and then just going out there and just trying to bring in revenue. But I think screwing up starting a company is remarkably easy as well. And unless someone's actually run a company in the past, they just don't have any real concept of just the spider web of legal issues that they're naturally going to come across. Whether that's intellectual property or contract or corporate laws or securities laws. In Oregon itself, I'm not. Well, you're probably aware, Skip, but raising money in Oregon is terribly risky, right? So um, there's just all that enormous amount of legal information out there that, especially first time founders, they just have no idea it's really out there or even how to interact with it. And so a lot of times they get off the ground with basically an empty shell of a company and just plow ahead trying to do business. And then they get, at some point they get their first surprise, their first legal surprise, and hopefully the paperwork's in order. A lot of times it's not.
And I think too, a lot of folks don't really kind of have a wake up call until they're maybe far enough along where, suddenly there's an employment dispute with one of the first employees or first hires that doesn't quite go according to plan, or they get their first round of funding and they're in conversations for those opportunities, and someone does some due diligence and asks some questions about, so what are all the employment agreements in place? Really? What employment agreements? You mean
Yeah.
they ought to be in place? Yes, yes, actually they do. And I think what most people don't realize is that, talking to an attorney, yes, it can seem like a bit of a chore up front, but it's saving you a lot of time and risk down the road. Um, and I'm wondering, like, how are there certain things that, like, for example, the comment you made around it's risky to raise capital in Oregon? Like, what are some of the things that you would want an entrepreneur to consider on that topic alone?
Yeah, about raising capital in Oregon.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I'll just pause for a second too. Are you familiar with the securities laws risks here too? I don't want to throw a bunch of information at you that you may already
No,
have.
I think that'd be great to kind of do a quick 101 for the layperson, because we have
Okay.
a lot of folks that are constantly coming in hot, saying, "Okay, I got to raise capital. Like, I'm going to launch this company, and we're going to be off to the races." And oftentimes there is a lack of kind of basic understanding of what exactly that means.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah, I'll try to give you the 30-second or 60-second version. So, Oregon is unique, and I still think it's unique. The only state out of the 50 states that um, when if a company raises capital, anybody who helps with the offering, so that's the executives in the company, the directors, the lawyers, the CPAs, financial advisors if they're involved at all, promoters, they're all going to be personally liable for any securities law claims later on. hard stop, no questions asked. I think the case is Prince v. Biden or Prince v. Biden. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's an Oregon Supreme Court case. That's really terrifying for raising capital in the state, especially for people like me, for lawyers and any other advisors to the company, because the Supreme Court basically said anybody who assists in this offering, um, the the um, the the investors can target with their claims. If they come back later and say there was some sort of fraud or omission or some sort of misrepresentation of any kind in the offering. So it could be really tough, right? And so when people come in and talk to us about raising capital, we have to, and we're required to, under our excess malpractice insurance, just gather a lot of information, right? Like incredible amount of information about these people and do almost like FBI level background searches on them just to make sure they are who they say they are and everything is clean. Um, so it can be a tough state, honestly, to raise money in. And a lot of times, just to be frank, the advice we give people is if they can get money outside the state to do it. And if all things being equal, if they can go elsewhere, it's just much safer to go elsewhere for them too, right? Because there's a whole point in creating the company from a real basics, the sort of basic principle of starting a company is they're trying to create a liability shield between them and the actual people on the other side of the business, right? And there's kind of no point to the liability shield from a securities law perspective in Oregon, but it still persists in other states.
Oh, that's really helpful, and I think that most people in Oregon are not fully aware of that, unless, of course, maybe they've consulted with an attorney. And again, a lot of them don't necessarily go that route. They're like, "Oh, I'm just going to issue a bunch of safe notes here, and we'll be off and running."
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, and the court has even said, even things like promissory notes are securities, right? So
Hmm.
people might be surprised to what a security even is, right? And people think it's stock or safe notes, but it can be a lot of things they might not even question. Even loans from, the cousins or grandma and grandpa. But
Hmm. Yep. Yep, exactly. And I'm wondering too, like, are you seeing certain areas of growth or activity right now across some of the companies that you're working with? And if so, what do those look like?
yeah, well, of course, everyone's talking about AI. I know you can't get away from it, right? So it seems like AI is getting slapped onto everything. It, just about everybody, well, maybe that's an overstatement, but you hear it in conversation constantly. I mean, our clients are using AI tools, trying to adopt them as quickly as possible. We are. It's just being built into the back end, if you will, and in just about every company that has a use for it. So that conversation piece is popping up. Obviously, startups are trying to do something in the AI space to the extent they can, because that's where the investment money is going. Investment money is obviously looking for anything AI. Um, but in general, startup funding kind of slowed down in the last 3 or 4 years. I think it's just starting to pick back up slightly. Um,
Mhm.
and we just saw a lot more M&A work in the last 3 or 4 years as opposed to startup work. I mean, it really just ran dry, honestly, I'd say, um, yeah, the last 3 years or so. It's really just starting to pick up. We're starting to get projects in now where people are raising real money again, but it's been a while, honestly, Skip. And we've um, we've in the meantime we've just been getting a lot of more M&A work. I think that might be because the wealthy people have money; they don't need to borrow it, and they're looking for cheap companies to buy. But
Mhm.
that's my guess.
Yep. Yeah, we started seeing the same sort of trend a few years ago, and yeah, you're right. Now we're starting to see in the last probably 6 to 12 months more companies raising more significant rounds and getting some real traction, which is great. A lot of it in the hardware and kind of deep tech space.
Mm.
And some software too, obviously, anything related to AI. And I'm wondering, in terms of your own practice, how are you all approaching AI?
Yeah, so I mean, for lawyers, there's of course the two big companies, Westlaw and Lexis, right? And they have their own AI products, and we tested both, picked one. And there's the local company, and apologize to one of your previous guests because I know there's a local company that's a competitor of those two that you interviewed as well. That's trying to do something
Oh,
similar.
was it Paxton?
Yeah, yeah,
Mark?
yeah,
Yep.
yep, exactly, Paxton. Yeah, and I think they're trying to do something similar, but we haven't tested their product. Um, But I think, all those products are basically, if I could summarize them, just a way of, um, speeding up lawyers' work, sort of on the back end, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, They don't yet, and I don't think they're intended to at the moment replace lawyers' work by any means, but they're really starting to eat away, and I think positively, honestly, the sort of low-hanging fruit that a lot of lawyers do and have had to do over the years. Um, and I love it. My partners love it. But research has just been just remarkably faster. Getting quick answers is remarkably faster. I mean, even a simple example is just being on the phone with a client who I've known for years, and they just ask, a random question where years ago I would have said, okay, I'll just let me do a little research. I'll call you back. I can just tell them, just hold on a second. I'll just run the AI search, which I'm going to tell you is not, I can't guarantee, but it'll give us, 90% accuracy. I'll run it and come back and be like, okay, well, that's probably the answer. Right.
Mhm. Right.
And yeah, this is information has just become instantaneous. Right. And I think, vetted, trusted information has become instantaneous, which is, it's really wonderful.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I think too, there's definitely implications for workforce and training as well. And I was listening to uh, general counsel of a major tech company, one of his recorded talks from last year, and he said, you know, um, as a lawyer, you kind of go through these pattern recognition exercises in terms of your training, where you start to see things that you can either avoid or replicate in terms of a best practice, in terms of issue spotting, and that usually makes a good senior lawyer. And if you eliminate those opportunities because they're being replaced by AI, how do we newly mint third and fourth year associates without having the benefit of the first and second year drudgery and sort of document review and pattern recognition? And it's a good question. And I would imagine that smaller firms have an opportunity to be a bit more nimble and agile on that front than maybe some of the larger ones. But I'm wondering if you have an opinion on that.
Yeah, it's a conversation we're having internally. When we first subscribed to one of the AI tools recently, I said out loud, my partners both not along. I think it's the death of associates. And I think it's a real reality for these young lawyers coming out of school. I'm sitting here 20 years into the profession, so I feel like I have a lot of comfort, knock on wood, but I don't know how they're going to come out and be able to provide the value that they traditionally provided to a lot of these firms, to your point, right off the bat. And then
Mhm,
also get the training that they typically did, to your other point. I mean, they could come in and, for example, and work with us, and we could train them up, but it's gonna be a completely different value proposition on their side to us, right, than it traditionally would have been, where I think a lot of what they could have contributed in the past is something we can press a button here and get the answer on pretty quickly. And so then people like me at smaller firms have to make the decision about, do we like with every employee, right? It's an investment for a return for the company. Do we invest the money there on that person on some sort of return, or is the investment not worth it any longer? Right. And it's like
mhm.
it's a real question to ask going forward, where I mean years ago it just that wouldn't even have been a question. Right.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's my answer at the moment.
All right. Well, as you're trying to process a lot of information and kind of keep tabs on trends and everything else, I'm wondering what do you typically look to in the way of resources? Are there certain podcasts you listen to or books you've read recently that you might recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I listen a lot to the Sam Harris podcast. It's not about law. It's a little bit more about philosophy and meditation. So I don't know how applicable it's going to be to your listeners here, but I listen to that one quite a bit. I used to listen to Mixergy quite a bit. I think that was kind of the where I got the idea for Northwest Corporate Law back in the
Mhm.
day. That's a startup podcast. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but I found that one really helpful when I was just going out on my own and just trying to start a firm, which is just, a company by another name. So yeah, I think if that's the type of podcast that I would go to, I think if I were just starting out right now and poke around it, it's just so much knowledge to be had.
Excellent. And as we kind of wrap up our time together, any sort of final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Yeah, I think what I see quite a bit is when people start out, they just don't value legal that much at the start of a company, because they're just trying to get money as quickly as possible, honestly. But as they grow, legal becomes more and more important because they just have much more to lose. Um, so at some point early on, I think the trick is for founders to decide when to invest in that legal relationship. It bears fruit and more fruit the earlier it's invested in. And I think the longer that someone waits to build that relationship, the harder it is to transition into that relationship effectively because it's just a completely different problem that's presented to the lawyer later on. So yeah, I think if you're starting a company, there's a lot you need to do. You got to make your money, but I think you also got to have to surround yourself with people like you, Skip, and CPAs and the right lawyers and the right advisors.
Well said. Well, thanks for taking some time to, share some wisdom with us, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Skip. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to be on.
That's a wrap on this episode of Techlandia, the podcast, where innovation meets insight. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow us, leave a review, and share it with your fellow tech explorers. You can follow us at techoregon.org for updates and more tech-fueled content. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep building the future.